All right. Should I give people another minute or two, or do people usually not attend live? I can give it another minute or two. And welcome to our agent clinic on Breach. So I am Colin, or Xineous in game. I'm a product manager by day, and also by day sometimes, but more usually by night. I am an Ascendant Initiator main. Absolutely love Breach. Think he's a super fun playstyle, especially on the days where I can't aim. So I am far from perfect at this game, but have a decent understanding of Breach. So I'm going to give you my best understanding from what I understand, but it's by no means perfect, so take it at your own risk. Overall, I mostly play him on Lotus and occasionally on Fracture, um, where I think the results speak for themselves. So overall, Breach has some of the strongest status util in game. He is one of my favorite support agents, and I think one of the best overall. Especially if you're doing an execute heavy comp or something that really needs to fight for space. He's a really strong agent, and I think he's also the easiest way to shut down Smurfs, since it doesn't matter how well you can aim if you're blind. It's also nice to have something where even if you can't hit your shots, you can still have really big team impact. And have a couple videos of here just for fun. So one is from a custom a couple weeks back of what it's like to play against Breach. Don't know if you guys can hear audio, but anyway, Breach is a lot of fun to play, and you can have a really strong impact just with your util. Some of the things that might make you hold off from playing Breach. First, he has no info, so of all of the initiators, he's the only one that can't get you any info at all except by peeking. He relies a lot on duelist coordination. For the most part, using your util for yourself is pretty mediocre. It's doable, but if you're looking to play something where you're utiling for yourself, there are much better picks than Breach. And the last thing to consider is that you run out of util fairly fast. Since you only have two flashes that don't recharge and one aftershock, you are fairly limited in the total util that you have. So overall, the majority of the time as Breach, you're going to be partnering with your duelist. On offense, that's usually going to take the look of taking space somewhere aggressively with them, overpushing for some extra space on post plant, or executing a site hit. On the defense side, some of the time you're going to be taking aggressive space. Some of the time you're going to be playing really safe for retake. Sometimes you might just be going for a trap play to get a pick or two. But overall, you're really working with your duelist, using util to disrupt and make some and create some opportunities for your duelist to take space, and your duelist is going to be the one that's taking advantage of most of the util. So because of that, Breach really excels the most when your team has a really strong duelist, especially a Jet, Neon, or Raze. You can play Breach with other duelists, but it's going to be a little harder to take space since those are the duelists with their movement ability. Since Breach is so reliant on team play, you really want to make sure that you're comfortable presenting your ideas or coming up with plans on the fly and getting your teams on board. If you're an agent select and you're not duo with someone, it's really important to make sure that your duelist, the person that's hovering duelist, either has a mic or is open to your calls. If you're able to go through and go through and communicate what you're looking to do to them. And generally, you want to be picking breach if you're comfortably taking aggressive space. You're a more proactive player and really want to be the one leading the charge. In terms of map, you really want to look for at least two of the three of having tight chokes where your fault line or concuss is going to be good. You want enough open areas that you can get value out of your flash, and you want tight enough sites or key areas to control that you can get value out of your ult. So to do this, where to play him, the most common perma-pick spot is on Fracture. He is also very popular on Haven and on Lotus. He is sometimes picked on Pearl, Bind, Ascent, and Split. But very rarely, I think PRX and a couple others ran him. You can occasionally see him on Breach, or excuse me, on Breeze, since there are a few places where you can get a good concuss line, but it's really his flashes that are strong there. On Icebox, I would not recommend playing him. He can be fun. He can be a fun off-meta pick to throw people off their game, but overall, it's going to be tough to get value out of his util without playing in really prescriptive ways. So basic guidelines. So as Breach, you're really team reliant, and you really want to make sure that you have someone utilizing your util so that when you go and flash 5, someone's peeking out to get a kill or two. So to do that, you're always going to want to make sure that you have a plan for what you want to do at a round, and you want to communicate it to your team. So at the start of each round, it should be something to the effect of, "Hey Raze, if we're on Fracture, let's go fight for a main. Maybe I'm going to hold concuss, and then as soon as they make their first step, I'll concuss and you swing. Maybe I'll say, let me know when you want to peek and call for a flash, and I'll flash for you." But you want to have a clear plan of what you're going to do and communicate it with your teams that they're playing around your util. You should always be calling your util, even if you have a preset plan of I'm going to concuss as soon as they make a step. Always call when you're using your util so that your team can get the best timings to swing off of it. And try to combo your util during key fights. So I'm sure if any of you have played a lot of Breach before, I'm sure you've had the experience where you ult someone or you concuss someone and you think, okay, this person's status, I'm going to swing and this is going to be a free kill, and then you get one tapped. So if you know that someone is in a particular place and it's a part of a key execute, it's really important to combo that util. So either ulting and then throwing out a flash, or throwing out an aftershock to clear a key corner, so you only need to focus on a couple angles. But you have really good execute util, and it's really, especially for your ult and for your concuss, it's really helpful to combo that util. Since you're often going to be taking aggressive space, especially if you're fighting in the same place a lot, it can get really predictable what Breach is going to do. And since Breach is fairly limited since he only has those 2 flashes, you can notice that if you're doing the same thing a few rounds in a row, the other team might just wait it out or look to counter. So it's really important to vary your patterns or timing. So if you're fighting a main on Fracture a few rounds in a row, maybe the first round you can cuss off the rip. Maybe the next round you go and have someone dry peek. Maybe you have a flash and then have them swing out. Maybe you play dish the next round or push out arcade. Since you have really limited util, it's really important to get value out of it when you are using it. And usually you want to avoid aggressive peaks until you have used your utility. Since you're going to have some of the strongest utility on your team, usually you don't want to be taking the first peaks because if you're the first one to die, then that's a lot of utility your team doesn't get to use in that round. Generally, again, you want to use util from safety. It takes a long time to pull out your flashes and to put them away. So you want to make sure that you're not standing out in the open while they're going out. As if someone flashes or someone swings out while you're in the middle of flashing, you're a very sad Breach. And then lastly, overall, Breach has the lowest ACS of any agent. So try not to focus on ACS or on the scoreboard. You can be really impactful just through assists or just through making space for your team, even if you aren't able to go through and frag out. Quickly running through Breach's util. So his E is going to be his default ability is Fault Line. So this, if you don't know, puts out a lane in front of him and concusses. So generally, you want to be using this on tight chokes and hallways. So I've got the mini map from Fracture up and showing some of the common concusses. But generally, you want to be using it in a place both that's going to be a common angle that you want to clear out. So this initial angle on A main, for instance, where people are often peeking, and you want to do it in a place where it's not easy for them to say swing out further and fight you. So you want to make sure that the util is either going to catch them or that they have to give up the angle entirely. It's especially strong to use against ops since it keeps them from scoping in. And concussing alone does give you an advantage, but you are going to get one tapped, so you just have to prepare for that eventuality. Know that you're giving yourself the best chance in that fight, but you will sometimes be sad. And if you're doing this on as part of a site hit, it's good to combo the other util like flashes. This is also often the first thing that you're going to use on a defensive push. So it's really good to combo with things like Raise Nade, Sova Ult, KO Nade. If you have an Astra on your team, then if someone's concussed, they can't actually escape her gravity well. So that util combos really well as well. Next most impactful piece is your flashpoint. So Breach has one of the stronger flashes in the game. As with any flash, you want to make sure that you're using it on open spaces where the person that's flashed doesn't have a good place to fall back to. So for instance, on Sands, if someone's playing Sands on Fracture, you know that if you get a flash, that there's a decent chance that you can get a kill since there's not really a good place for them to hide behind a box or something. Usually you want to use it up high on the chokes, just so that if someone's playing, for instance, on top, if you're, say, flashing a site and someone's playing on top, if you use it too low, it will get hidden by the floor. So generally, you're wanting to use it a little bit higher on the choke points, and you want to use it where it's going to be visible to the most of the angles on site. If your duelist is dead and it's falling on you to entry, if you're using it for yourself, do not insta swing. First, it takes a while to pull your gun back out after you flash. So if the person's not yet flashed and you swing out, they have a massive advantage. And also, if someone is flashed, one of the first things that they're going to do is spam that tight choke. So if you wait like a second or two after you flash, often they'll be firing off a lot of shots. There'll be some inaccuracy, and then when you swing, you'll have some more util. Aftershock Breaches C is really good for clearing corners, and especially to focus and force enemies into the open. This is one of the most important things to calm to your team because it is really, really tough to use by yourself. So some common examples, if you're looking to clear them out of Haven, see Long. That can be a good place to tell your team to post up on Long and say, hey, I'm forcing that a cubby. That's going to force them to swing them. Wine on a main in a set is another common example. So you really want to. It's a really strong util because they can't dodge it if you cover the entire area. And you just need to make sure that since it takes so long to pull your gun back out, that you have someone else that's actually watching it. If you are playing solo, then one of the best things you can do is use it to force them out into the open, hide, and then flash. So since you know that they're not behind cover, you know that they're going to get hit by the flash. So that can be a good way to combo it. It's also really useful for stopping plants to delay for a few seconds or using in post plants to interrupt diffuses. And if you're feeling particularly creative, Sova players usually drone from the same spots, and Sky players usually dog from the same spots. So if you know some common points, like right outside garage on Haven here, and you hear a drone being used, you can just throw off the aftershock. They don't get the warning that they're about to be damaged, and you can sometimes get a cheesy kill off of it. It's also really strong to use just for visual clutter. So if you aftershock somewhere and then flash in the same spot, it's really hard for the enemy team to see the flash to dodge it. So it can be a really strong tool just to hide something, either yourself swinging out or to go through and hide a flash. And then finally, it breaches ult. So it throws folks up in the air. It also concusses. A fun thing you can actually do, quickly tab over to Valorant, is if you have any things that you can't normally jump up like this, you can actually boost just by jumping at the right time, if I do it right. And then that lets you jump on top of things like sage walls. Excellent. It's excellent for site takes and retakes. Usually, you're going to want to use it either off the back of info or to take some extra control. One of the things that you're going to notice playing Breach is that usually, if you have your ult up, folks are going to, and you're on offense, oftentimes folks are going to play offsite. So, for instance, if you're on ascendant on, or excuse me, if you're on ascent and you're on A, if you have breach ult, oftentimes people will be choosing to play tree or choosing to play heaven. So one of the things that you can do is either have, if you have a Sova or if you have a Fade, you can look to get info early on if there are people on site and it's worth using. Or one of the other things you can do is try and use to take some extra space. So usually it's pretty tough to take the space around tree if you're pushing A. But if you know that no one's on site, you can choose to use it to go through and take that extra tree space and get some extra space for that post plant. And then it's also since the secondary util of it is a concuss after they're done being thrown in the air, you have some of the same issues as your fault line, where people can, if they're taking their time and aiming, they can often one tap you. So this is another example where it's really important to combo your util either with a flash or with an aftershock to make sure that you're getting that value. Any questions on any of Breach's util or how to use it before we jump into some plays?
Yeah, what do you usually buy on pistol rounds?
If I'm playing with folks that I know are good, I go full util on attack all the time. If I'm on defense and I'm not in a spot where I can play off my duelist, I'll sometimes buy a single flash and a ghost. But 90% of the time, I'm just buying full util. Any other questions? All right. So with this, I've got a few just plays to call out to give you some ideas of some of the awesome things that you can do for Breach. I'll go over a few site takes on Haven and a few ecos to give you an idea of some of the things you can do. I'll show you in-game on Lotus and then leave the rest of the time for any questions you might have. So on Haven, on C site, one of the this is going to be one of your standard site hits. Haven is one of the more common places where you see Breach played. So one of the things that you can do is if you can easily get into site cubby, it's really easy to cover the entire site with util. So if you can get into cubby, you can concuss down the whole right side, flash front site, flash back site, have your jet dash in. Similarly, on Haven A, if you can get up long, it's another place where you can concuss a good part of the execute. You can flash front sight, flash back sight. One of the general things that you'll notice in your site executes is it's going to be tough to get all of your util off at once. So you want to be really clear in what your plan is to your duelist. So I think that was Rock's voice earlier. He's one of the guys I duo with fairly often since he's an aggressive duelist. But one of the things I'll do before our executes is say, hey, I'm gonna, flash front sight, then flash back sight. And as we're going through and doing our executes, I'll say, okay, I'm flashing front sight now. He'll satchel out, and then I flashing back sight now, and then I'll swing back sight. So staggering some of that util and just making sure that you're clearing the entire site with your util is really strong. One of the most fun things to do on Breach, though, is you really have a lot of options for your eco rounds, especially if you have a defense with a movement ability. Oftentimes, even just with something like jet knives or just something like a stinger, you can really throw around just by getting people fully blind, getting people utiled, and having your duelist catch them in an off timing to try and drop a couple guns. So if we're on Haven, some things I like to do are on C. You can go through and you can flash through the cubby and have someone dash up. If they're there, then that's going to blind everyone that's in this initial lobby space, and then that gives you your duelist that initial space and potentially a pick. And then you even have a secondary flash to either make sure that they can get out untraded, or if they want to overheat and go for more, then you can flash in this corner here through this cubby, and that gives them even more space to get some luck. You can do a similar thing on mid and Haven. So if you play from top mid, you can actually flash through that little box that's directly outside of B. And that's another place where your jet or your rays, your neon can really get up quickly and take advantage of your short range guns. And again, you have a good spot to secondary flash to either have them overheat or to get out safely. With this one, it's really important to make sure that your controller smokes mid so that you don't get caught on the take. So yeah, those are some examples of some site takes and some common some common eco strats. Does anyone have any questions on anything we've covered so far? Oh, yep. Okay. Ripped post, yes. Hello, everyone. All right. So with that, I'll show you in game. So Lotus is one of my favorite maps and where I find myself playing Breach the most. I really love Lotus just because I think there's a lot of great opportunities for flashes, especially. You've got a lot of open places with without a lot of cover. And there are a lot of good opportunities for some good space to fight for. So one of my favorite things to do is on Breach, fight for this A main space. So on defense, one of the things that you can do is you can go through and off the rip. You can concuss this space, combo it with the raise nade, and then follow it up with a flash through this box to allow them to go, or your neon can dash up there. It's an easy way to take control of that A space. One of the things that you can do off the rip is also just throw a concuss nade. Once you do that once, you don't really need to do it again for the rest of the half because they're going to be afraid of that. And just the threat of the breach concuss is going to be enough to keep them. Just the breach concuss will be enough later since there's the threat of the nade following up. Once they get used to that util combo, you can also go through and switch it up. If you have someone that's going through and trying to regularly beat the timing on that concuss, you can go through and flash through this upper pillar right here, and then have your duelist immediately swing. And then that way, if they have like a neon or a jet or someone that's going to try and dash across, they're going to be stuck up right about here in the open, where you can get an easy pick. But often just going through and concussing this gives your duelist enough time to get up here. And once your duelist is up here, you have a ton of opportunities to do things like flash through this to get the space. You can go through and do another flash here, anything, and have your duelist swing off that. And even go through and aftershock this. So it's Breach is really fun on this map to try and fight through a lot of that util. Similarly on B, you can go through and run a trap play. So you can go through and play B. You have a really good fault line if you just line it up here to take that space. The flash right here on this corner is also really good as sort of a trap play to try and catch anyone that might be playing pillars. One thing to note is that while the util is really good for taking control of these initial areas, it's really tough to go through and overpush. Usually, you're not going to get much value out of pushing past here. Because if I go through and flash, I might catch the person here, but while I'm clearing this person, it's easy for them to swing me from spawn. And then if I try and go into spawn, I've got angles here that I have to worry about, here I have to worry about, and here I have to worry about. So the taking the space and leaving a duelist here can be really strong. But I rarely try and limit the rounds that we overpush. And then lastly, on C, you can do some similar things. So your concuss lines up pretty well to make sure that they can't swing this initial space to stagger that timing. And then you have good options for flashes if they're up close here. You have good option for a flash here, and you can force them out of the right corner entirely with your aftershocks. A lot of what you're going to end up doing on Lotus is playing for retake, though. So you have your ult fits very conveniently well on a lot of these sites. You also have options for flashes and concusses to retake any of those. So yeah, that's what I had to talk to you all about today about Breach. So just as a quick summary, he's a support agent that's really fun to play, especially if you have a really strong aggressive duelist like Rock or like Abe or someone else that you want to play with that you play well with and you know that they want it to be aggressive and take up space. It's really important that you go through and have a plan and calm all of your util to your team so that they can play off of it well. And then, for the most part, you really want to make sure that you're using your team to play off of your util to have as big of an impact as possible. So with that, happy to spend some time answering any questions you might have. If you have any specific maps where you're looking to play Breach and have some questions about util, happy to answer those as well. We also have some folks here that are much higher ranked than me and might have some better ideas about how to play Breach. Any maps that are common in league play or team play and not in ranked, I really don't see, at least in lower elos, I don't see much breach on Haven. And I think that's because it's one of the harder places to use his util without coordination. It's really good in a coordinated team environment when you're playing a lot of retake as a team. But in ranked play, you're going to be doing there. I often struggle and end up on retake solo with when we're down numbers. It's just a lot tougher to play retake in general in ranked. Although that seems to be getting better as I get higher rank, so that might be a little easier. Any controllers he's specifically good with? His concuss combos really well with Astra Suck. And overall, it's nice having an Omen for the Omen blinds, so that you can, when you're taking that early space, you have the you have an additional util option to push up with. Um, if you have a harbor on your team, it's just important that you coordinate because it can be really easy for your flashes to get eaten by his cascade walls if you guys are trying to use util at the same time. Why is Sky so inferior to Breach? Hi, Jeff. I think they're very different agents. Sky has a lot of options for util, but is going to be a lot harder to take that aggressive space since you just have the two flashes and you don't have other things to clear out angles. Um, so I think on maps where so the reason that Fracture is one of the most popular ones is you both have good open spaces to flash, you have tight chokes to concuss, but most importantly, you're on defense, it's really important to be fighting for that initial space. So that's something where Breach really excels, where someone like Sky is going to have a tougher time. Since you just have those two flashes to work with, if they dodge the flashes, or if they wait and have someone playing anti, you don't have quite the same options as you do with Breach. And yes, there was a gap in the omen smoke. I'm notorious for being horribly bad with my omen smokes, both in game and in Valo plant, apparently. Yeah, also, if anyone else has advice to add on in, feel free to chime in as well. Yeah, breach and coordinated play on Haven is really rewarding. Especially some of the retakes you can do from Heaven are really cool. If you're in Heaven as Breach, you can actually aftershock to clear the entire left side of Heaven, force them into that right side, and then if you flash through the floor, that gives you pretty much guaranteed way to clear all of Hell in A. So that's a fun combo you can do on the retake. Or you can just do the more traditional, concuss across default flash out. Yeah, it's a good point, Snappy. We talked about the visual clutter a little bit before with Reach Aftershock, but as you're going through and it's going, you really can't see the flash that's going out, which tough to demonstrate as one person. But yeah, if you flash in the same spot as your Aftershock, it could be really tough to see. All right. Well, I think that puts us right about at the 30-minute mark. So thank you all for your time. If you have any questions about Breach or want to play some games ever, just let me know. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, Snappy. Or Xineous. Sorry.
But yeah, have a good day, everyone. See you.